And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and thank you so much for joining us for our unique podcast community. We explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world, as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. And this is our first podcast of 2025, and I'm most excited to have my dear friend Kristin Sampson here, a wonderful, noted Puccini soprano, and just a great singer and a dear friend. So welcome, Kristin.
Thank you so much for having me, Maestro Tramm. This is just a delight. And welcome to 2025, everyone.
Yes. A little late, but we're excited to jump in. And, it's always great to have these conversations with your colleagues. And, you were on the podcast a while ago. I had you featured on here before, and we talked, and it was a great conversation. I can't wait to discuss what you've been up to and what does this year look like in the performing arts for you?
Oh, goodness. Well, first of all, going back to what we did, it was during COVID, and it was such a privilege to be a part of that and, be a part of what I would consider, a moment in history that we all shared. And to have that, I know it might sound silly to say it this way, but that interaction and really be able to talk to people when we were all social distanced and, so far apart, it was absolutely exactly what the doctor ordered at that moment. So again, thanks for including me in that.
Well, it was amazing because we all had so much free time because we're usually running around performing in rehearsals and doing so many other things. And I think we did almost 350 podcasts, and now struggling to find time but it's great to find this time to see us back in action doing what we love. And but boy, wasn't that an interesting time with the lockdowns and the everyone finding things to do with their lives?
Yes. And I'm telling you, you made definite lemonade out of a very difficult situation. And we all ended up watching the podcast and at least having some, grasp of artistic unity. It was a gift. So thanks for that. And 2025 is looking to be a very good year artistically. Obviously, we're doing this amazing Puccini, and I've got a couple other wonderful Puccini things down the works. I've got a Fanciulla and then some butterflies and a Tosca, and it's just some great things, all coming up. And again, it's always such a privilege to sing this repertoire, at least to me. I know there are those of us who love Verdi, love Mozart, and I love all of the music, I really do, but I have a special place in my soul for Puccini, and it just really speaks to me artistically. And I can say, with you, we've had the privilege of working on the Bohème together many moons ago. And, Mimi is such a sympathetic character, but now that we're getting an opportunity for this butterfly, my goodness, I mean, the storytelling in this is it's just second to none. I mean, it's just such a beautiful story. It's a true story. And, I just can't wait for this project. So
we're going to delve into some wonderful discussion of Cho-Cho-San and the heroines. How did you start your career in opera, and how did you start singing? How did you get into this art form to start with?
Well, I really started singing as a child. I was very privileged. My mother was part of Sweet Adeline's. I don't know if you've
absolutely
what that is,
barbershop.
But it is a barbershop situation for female voices, and they at that point of time I would sit and listen to them practice, and she had a beautiful voice. And I then was in grade school and all of that, and I just was able to kind of do the musical theater type things as a child. And then when I got to probably about my first year of college, my professor told me, your voice is just really better for opera. And I was like, really? And, because at that point of time, musical theater was exploring different ways to try rock musical theater or just only built musical theater. And I'm not exactly destined for that, but, the classical musical theater, which is, My Fair Lady or, any of that type of stuff, I absolutely thrived in. But at that point, I had a very wonderful teacher, Dr. Walter Foster, who who guided me. And he said, I think you're really going to enjoy exploring, these ladies. They have a lot to say, and you love acting. So these storytellings, would be right up your alley. And I thought, oh, okay, well, let's see what this is about. So, I took on some, just smaller things, probably starting off, and lighter things. And then as I've gotten, progressively better and better technique, and, you just grow into it, I guess is the best way to say it. Some people really and truly born for only Puccini and then maybe grow into Wagner. But, I started off, more in musical theater, and then definitely grew into these wonderful Puccini heroines. So
I think it's for the American singers. I think almost all of the singers I've interviewed on the podcast started musical theater because that's our first exposure to music on the stage.
Right.
Especially in America, it's unusual to have the background in opera to begin with, unless your parents were opera singers, I guess.
I think that's true. And I mean, the majority of my colleagues, we all still have such a, I know it might sound silly to say it this way, but it's like a very profound love or understanding for musical theater. I mean, it taught me so much about storytelling, and, so many of the things with, singing in English. I absolutely love to sing opera in English now because of my background with singing, wonderful, wonderful, historic works of musical theater in English. So anyway, it definitely, that part transferred over, and I would say the storytelling or the acting, certainly did. So
let's jump into Puccini. So what was your first foray into the Puccini world, and what did that teach you?
Well, my first foyer was singing Mimi, and I was covering it. And it was at the Capo Opera Theater, which was a company that was around in New York for a number of years. I want to say at least 30 years. But, when I was straight out of college, I had an opportunity to be a resident artist there. And one of my resident artist assignments was to sing Mimi. And I, at that point, had never sung any lyric repertoire. I had come from singing, quite honestly, Queen of the Night, Constanza, then I kind of grew into maybe a Violetta, and I was singing a lot of Violettas. And then they said, oh, no, we definitely think you can do this. And I remember taking it to my teacher, Diana Soviero, still my teacher, still absolutely love her. But long story short, she said, I think that the middle voice is a very interesting part of your voice. I think this would be very good for you. So I thought, oh, okay, but, quite honestly, it was an opportunity of a lifetime because the soprano I was covering was singing something at City Opera. So she could do all of the performances with the exception of one. So I ended up covering and then having to learn the role in about 2 weeks, and, going on for
cover. Yes, for sure.
So, but that, I mean, again, it was a treacherous challenge with the Italian language. I am not a native Italian speaker, not even close, but I have so much respect for how things are written and how Puccini just masterfully uses the music to just, obviously bring out the text in every way, shape, and form. It's just glorious. So long story short, though, for that, I really feel like my areas of learning were stylistically working on the Italian. And then, of course, being having the opportunity to tell Mimi's story. I mean, it's pretty wonderful.
Puccini manages to take you on that journey with one of these operas. Bohème, Mimi, you see the love, you see them fight, you see her die. I mean, it's just this incredible. It is only in 2 hours. The shows are short, and they're incredibly compact. And Puccini writes it all down for you. It's amazing.
I agree. And when you're, for example, if you're an audience member and you're trying to decide, oh, should I go to this opera? I'm not quite sure if this opera is going to be the right opera for me. I find that, with Puccini, like, for example, the La Bohème or the Butterfly, they are super accessible. The music, you absolutely leave humming a tune. And because of the way the music is set, the storytelling is so clear. It just invites the audience member to be swept away to another world. It's really wonderful.
I'm always so inspired by Puccini because you see in it a convergence of national styles. He, especially early on, he started using leitmotifs and experimenting with Wagner and using Debussy in his orchestration and also
Yes.
techniques. So we don't realize how, and then combining it with Italian melody and just a gift for melody, and it's this unique style. It's truly international and just it works. It's magic form.
Maestro, you're absolutely right. And if I might add, if somebody doesn't know the opera La Fanciulla del West, for example, you can listen to it. And I know it sounds weird to say it, but it's got elements that I swear are directly from Debussy, or because it's got so many really interesting harmonic moments that are just interwoven with this thematic material. It's amazing how it's structured. But you're right, 100%. Those motives go directly in all of his operas.
So what did that first experience teach you? Having to learn the role so quickly. I know from a conductor, I can tell you my perspective. When I was a chorus master under Maestro Soloppini, he would always tell me that the stake lies around every page of La Bohème. And I never forgot that because I've conducted Bohème at least 25 times now. And it does. It never gets easier. It's always a challenge. It always keeps me on my toes and requires everything for the artist performing it.
100% agreed. I would say the very first humble lesson was really the language, really trying to work on the language and understanding, exactly and precisely what the storytelling is telling us, really diving into that. And then secondarily, which is not really even secondarily, it's understanding Puccini's harmonic language. It's absolutely glorious, but there are moments that, if you're singing Butterfly, or if you're singing Bohème, or if you're singing Turandot or Fanciulla, there are these little things that he does in his composition style that kind of transfer over. But when it's your first foyer into Puccini, it's one of those things where you're discovering it, and it's almost like magic on every page, because you're hearing these heartbreaking themes. And at that point, I have to be really honest, I was guided by wonderful people. Michael Capasso was the director.
Mm-hmm.
Francine Harmon was the choreographer. We had an amazing team. Passian Mazzagatti was our maestro, and I was extremely fortunate to have people who were patient, who helped me really get up to speed quickly, because I needed to be guided fast, if you will. And I was able to manage with their guidance, but there's just so much more than what's on that black and white page that you look at when you are turning from section A to section B or whatever. There's just so much more to learn. It's wonderful.
So what's it like getting to repeat a role and do it regularly? I know for myself, it's just terrifying the first time, and then each time I find something new. Like I'm back in Tosca right now, and I'm back in Butterfly again, doing all my research and having a blast. And I'm like, I never thought of it that way. And look at that chord change, and look at that way that they use the bassoon in this phrase to lead. And every time I do it, it deepens my respect for the art form.
I would echo that sentiment 100%. Every time, Maestro, every time that I have the opportunity to sing Butterfly, for example, Cho-Cho-san, I remember my first production going to what they called butterfly school, but it was understanding, that you don't use your thumbs, that there's a reverence and really a nuance to portraying a geisha. We did a lot of research. We did a lot of understanding. It's not just moving from point A to point B. There is a lot with the stage comportment. There is a lot to be understood for how she would respond, that she wouldn't necessarily look somebody in the eye directly. That there's so many nuances to understanding Cho-Cho-san. So initially, I would say my first Butterfly, I was quite nervous, as you stated you were, but as I've been able to perform her on many occasions now, thank goodness, I absolutely love bringing that language that I've been taught in terms of my stage comportment and the storytelling to the performances, and then always trying to take away something new. And it's just a privilege. It really is, because, you know, when you've got people in the audience who've seen it, let's say 10 times just as an audience member, and they come and they talk to you about your interpretation or how much they loved the opera or how, whatever it is, then you just know that you've been able to do your job. And again, it's just a wonderful opportunity to grow. And I every time I look at a role, I just want to have that happen, do you know?
Absolutely. And it's just, you know, it's always interesting to me that every time I take in front of every one of my scores, I write down where I performed and what the date was. And it's just, it takes me back to each one. I can remember, okay, I remember working on this one and rehearsing with this one and some of the challenges we faced and the things we've overcome and the performances and the audience members. I just think that's a special part of what we do as the colleagues we work with and the audiences we touch.
100% agree. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that sometimes, even when you think about the relationships with the colleagues, you know, it's very sacred, you know, working with you as a maestro, working with my colleagues on stage, all of that becomes very, very, because we're vulnerable together. We are sharing, you know, the ability to open ourselves up, be essentially a vessel for whatever this artistic gift is inside of us. And we have to, really be able to do that with an intimate sense of vulnerability. And, you know, so we become very close-knit as a cast, even if it's a short journey together. I would say all of us, in every production I've ever been in, I'm almost always in contact with every cast I've ever been a part of, at least here and there. It's again, it's like an extended family, you know?
And social media lets us even be closer than we would be in the past. So I think that's a great thing that we can keep in touch with colleagues in Europe.
Yep. And you can see where they are and you can follow them. I mean, because in my situation, again, I know that every, you know, artist is different, but I've had the privilege of, you know, singing a lot in Italy, singing a lot in, you know, different parts of the world. And I've, you know, when that happens, you do build these, like I said, extended families. You know, most recently in Cluj-Napoca, I was able to do a butterfly. And, you know, I walk in for my first day of rehearsal and I thought to myself, oh, one of my great wishes was that I could hopefully be in touch with my friend Julia. And I hope that it, you know, would work, that, you know, while I'm in Romania, I'll look her up and, you know, because we've been out of touch since Emmeline, and I'm sorry to just go into this crazy story. So, you know, she was my Aunt Hannah and we had won a competition together and all of these things. And we were in Hungary when that happened. And it was just a great, immersive, wonderful experience. But we were very close and I loved her. But we just, you know, life happens, COVID happens, and, you know, you fall out of touch. I walk into rehearsal first day and we look at each other and just wept. She was my Suzuki. Perfect. And here I am in the middle of Cluj-Napoca at a theater that I would never have thought, I mean, and she's my Aunt Hannah. She's my Suzuki. Sorry about that. But she was part of the production, and it was magical. So
it's a small world in the opera industry. We're all one step removed from each other at any given time. It's amazing.
Yes. So I'm sorry, that was a little bit of a rambly story, but all to say, it was just like, again, being reunited with family. It was a beautiful experience.
So let's dig into Cho-Cho-San particularly. There's so many challenges, as you mentioned, just to stay on. There's so much to know, whether it's stage comportment, but let's start musically. When it was written, I believe it was probably the hardest role ever written for a female singer. It was one of which she almost never leaves the stage. There's so many demands. Tell us about that.
Well, just as you've stated, Maestro, you are correct. She very rarely leaves the stage, and depending upon the production, you may be permitted to have an intermission between Acts 1 and Acts 2, but lots of times they will group Acts 2 and Acts 3 together so that she has to stay into her house, and then she comes out and looks for Pinkerton because of what's happening, in the storytelling. But that means that you are on the stage for a very long time at the top of Act 2 through the end of the opera. That is a very long time. And again, it's all beautiful music. And there's a little bit of a break in Act 3 or Act 2, Part 2, if you look at it that way. It depends on, how you group the score. But by and large, she is the the opera. I mean, in terms of the music, there's a lot of wonderful characters in there. There's the Uncle Buns, there's Tsuki, there's, Pinkerton, there's Sharpless, there's, obviously moments with beautiful choristers and all of that. But the meat and the primary arias, of which there are three, if you look at it that way. There's, the Un bel di vedremo, there's Che tua madre, there's Tutto tu piccolo Dio. And, two of those arias lie in Act 2. And that last one is right before she makes whatever decision she makes in the opera, towards the end of the opera. So it's wonderful. It's challenging in so many ways because you have to stay precision focused 100% of the time from start to finish. And again, I look at it from the arc of course, the storytelling, because, in Act 1, she comes in as this wonderfully naive little girl of, I'm 15 years old. I mean, what does one really know at 15 at that moment of their life? But then when we see her later in the opera, I mean, she is a few years older, but it's not as if she's, changed, too much. She's had to, weather the storms of having to, obviously raise the child and have all of these things happen. But there is an acting arc to be had from, literally Act 1, and then you take a little break, and then obviously come back, and then we see her in a different moment of her life, trying to be a married woman. And it's just, it's a wonderful way to, proceed and tell the storytelling, because this is a woman who's a survivor, So, but, when you think about it, when she does have this wonderful opportunity to see her friend Sharpless again, when he comes back with the letter, and there's that whole letter scene. I mean, it's brilliantly written. She's so excited. She can barely, she just, oh, il mio signor console, signor console. I mean, it's just like, oh my God, you're back. Here it is. Look, this is how I've kept the house. This is how we're done. It's so, there's this childlike side of her everywhere, which is completely not the Japanese side, because that would never, that could never be. She should never be that effusive about anything, but she can't help it, because at the fundamental, she's still very youthful in her own world, So I hope that gives you a little bit of a.
Absolutely. For the audience, it's so interesting to delve, because this is such an incredibly dense, to watch her. It always tears me up inside conducting Butterfly, because I feel, she takes us on an emotional journey with her, from that youthful, and his music always is perfectly encapsulating the character. And right. By the end, I can barely keep it together. I'm crying along with the audience. So.
There's a very fine line, and I know that I've spoken to about it with my teacher, and oftentimes I'm always interested to hear what maestri think and directors think, but as an actor, you can never get to the moment where you yourself are giving in to that inclination ever. But you do have to absolutely go to that vulnerable place and open up and show that you are shattered. And, it's within that brokenness that she finds her strength to make, some ultimate choices and decisions. So I can only imagine, as, conducting this for the number of times that you have, that you are in it. I mean, you're just immersed in it. So
you have to be with Puccini. You have to be close to the edge. You always have to be close to the edge and hard on your sleeve, and take those, the dum 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 dum.
Yes.
You have to be there in the moment, but it's not going too far, right? It's like you can't lose it entirely. I have to keep the orchestra together, and that's always keeps me grounded.
And that really, I think for me, it was a very good lesson early on. Was, Fran Harmon was, like I said, she was a choreographer at Da Capo, and she was one of our really important people when we were resident artists or whatever. And she helped me with my butterfly school. She really helped me, because she knew exactly what to do and what the traditions and how to explore them. And she was the one who said, my dear, you can't ever ever, because then we're worried about you. You can never cross that line. Don't make the audience worry. If anything, it's definitely being vulnerable. It's definitely opening up your soul. And she said, but you can never let it go to that next moment. It's their job to go to that next moment, not yours. So
tell us about some memorable times singing Butterfly. Some of the places you've been. You've sung in Italy a lot. Tell us some of the ones that stick out in your mind.
Gosh. Quite honestly, I think my most memorable one, which is right at the front part of my mind, is this last opportunity in Cluj, and it's largely memorable because we put it together very quickly. It was part of their repertory season, and of course, the production already exists. So somebody just comes in and basically plugs you into something that they've already been doing. So everybody else knew exactly what to do with the blocking, and it was my job to very quickly, almost as if I was a cover, jump in, and do it and understand the gravitas of certain moments that the director really wanted to bring forth, and understand, the different moments that you yourself want to bring forth as an artist, and marry those ideas and make sure that you're honest, and again, having integrity as an artist, because you always want to do whatever the interpretation is, from the director's side of it, and help tell that side of the story. But you also always want to make sure to never force anything, and that it's very much part of your identity and who you think Butterfly is as well, because then it really, it seems very organic to anybody who would see it. So we're in the middle of this production, and one of the things that they didn't tell me in this production, somebody I think maybe mentioned it in passing, and it didn't dawn on me until we were in the middle of the actual dress rehearsal. The house that she's in, they basically say, in Act 2, it starts to break down because Butterfly doesn't have money. There's no way for her to financially sustain herself. So the house, in the director's vision, starts to sink.
Oh.
Okay. So, you think, all right, well, that makes sense. She doesn't have money, and it makes sense to you in theory until you're walking through the door for the first time on stage in the middle of a dress rehearsal with an invited audience, and you whack your head because the door jamb is now lower for Act 2 than it was in Act 1, where you easily cleared. I'm short. I'm 5'3". So let me tell you, my poor Suzuki, Yulia, really had to bend down. And I thought to myself, what's happening? What just happened? And then I realized when I went back in that, the house was sinking. That meant that they literally, during intermission, which is brilliant, actually, really brilliant, took the structure and lowered everything. So then the clearance of the threshold for the doorways was lowered. And, it's a brilliant idea and concept. But, for me, that was one of my more memorable ones, because I walked out and I was like, what just happened? My goodness, and it was hilarious. And all at the same time, I thought to myself, I wonder if everybody heard that. I wonder if they heard it whack. That's a very unusual moment when you're really trying to kind of keep it together and stay very focused as an actor, character, opera singer, obviously.
You're preparing to go out there and deliver all that, and you whack your head and have to. The same thing happened to me. I've worked in this theater several times. It's the Jacksonville Center for the Performing Arts, beautiful 3,000-seat theater, and the entrance to the pit has got some wacky low thing, and it's head above the thing, because I can't be the first one that did this. I conducted there in 2018 or 17, and I was about to do maybe Carmen or something, and I whacked my head right as I walked out to do the show. And now every time I'm like, touch, go under.
But I mean, it does. It absolutely informs you to know kinesthetically in your body, these are the things that I'm going to do to try to protect myself for this next adventure so that it goes all right, all of these wonderful things. But I mean, then for the rest of the dress rehearsal, I was mindful. And then on the night of the performance, very, very, very mindful of what that was a new element. And when you're on stage, because we didn't have a ton of rehearsal, it was just a couple, times actually on the stage before we went up. So it was a very unique, but very memorable, challenge or experience for a Butterfly. I hope that,
That's a great one.
Yeah, it definitely took my breath away, if you will.
Well, knocks intended to me for a change, so that was good. And now I'm very careful every time I go on the stage. I'm like, I'm not going to do that again.
Exactly. And what I decided to do, after my intermission was walk through that door at least once before, because again, when you're wearing a wig and your bearings are off anyway, and I always try to walk the stage, but for whatever reason, I didn't before that dress rehearsal. And boy, I knew better now. I think I always will now make it a personal policy to take time. It's a good investment in time to just walk it. Just walk the stage. No big deal. It's intermission. Nobody's going to care. Do it.
Things that the audiences don't see us doing. These are the important
Right.
things that keep us.
And I will think of that for you going into the pit. There's the wall.
Wow. So now you've performed in Torre del Lago, right? And Puccini's
Yes.
What
Torre
was
del
it like?
Lago was one of my very, very favorite performance opportunities. Their current artistic director, Angelo, is now back. He was there before, and then he left and did other projects for a while, and now he's back. And he is absolutely wonderful. He knows so much about opera, really understands what the foundation is about. He's just a wonderful, wonderful, knowledgeable, just a fount of knowledge for Puccini, gentleman who's now in charge of that of Torre del Lago. When I was there, I was asked, or given rather, the wonderful opportunity of singing Tosca with a wonderful tenor, Dario Di Vietri, and he has also sung around the world, all over Italy, in a lot, in America, and some places, Greece. Anyway, long story short, that production for me, I feel like it kind of just changed my life. I remember going on for the start of Act One, and it started to rain right as we were in the middle of our opening moments of our love duet. And, they called rain delay for like 10 minutes. And then they let us go back again, and we did the rest of the show. And by the time I was singing Visi d'Arte, I remember turning my head and, I was fighting with Scarpia, and I turned my head, and it was a full moon over the lake with light reflecting off of the lake. And I had an emotional moment where I had to say, get it together, pay attention. It's not about the moon, but it was one of the most beautiful venues and beautiful things I've ever experienced in my life. And, the orchestra there, all pros, ridiculous. Maestro was great. And, like I said, my cast was amazing. I was very, very fortunate and privileged. And, hopefully in future seasons, I'll have an opportunity to go back. But that was a Tosca. And again, it was absolutely one of the most amazing experiences truly of my life. And singing in a venue like that, that's outdoors, you think to yourself, am I even going to be heard? They don't mic. But the acoustic in that particular space is ridiculous. You can barely snap or clap on, and they hear it everywhere. It is just the way the space is constructed. So
I didn't know they didn't mic it. Wow, that's a really interesting one.
It's really if they're doing like archival recordings, there may be some mics somewhere, but it's not their, we don't have body mics.
Those aren't amplification mics. Those are just recording mics. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we didn't wear body mics. Nobody, that I know of was working back to deal with sound. So, it was what you got. So, and that's pretty great. It's pretty wonderful when that happens. So.
Did you find the Italian audiences differently, their approach to Puccini and the way they responded to the performances?
In all truthfulness, it was one of the most wonderful things that you could ever imagine. They all know the words.
Wow.
They all know the words. And 9 times out of 10, especially like when singing Visi d'Arte, they're practically singing with you. It's like a sing-along, which is great. Great. And they, it's the enthusiasm for it is like being at an athletic event.
I always say it's like a soccer match. Yep.
Yeah. No, it really is. And I think when you hear that said, you think to yourself, really? Is that exactly possible. And it's one of those things where it's very unexpected to hear people that enthusiastic about opera, but they bring people, babies all the way through, grandparents. They all come together as a family. Tickets are very populist prices, so it's not like you're draining your bank to bring your family to the opera, which is also a good thing. But the audience knows the piece. They're coming to the piece because they love the piece. And, I know it might sound like I'm completely exaggerating, but they sing with you. So it's like having a wonderful family, all joining you in song. And even in the fights with Scarpia, you could hear them. Oh yeah, ooh, again, they're so invested. So it was great.
I felt like that when I conducted Porgy and Bess in Newark, and we had a really great audience. There was 2,500 people in the audience, and people were like responding. Like they booed when Crown walked on the stage, and I just love I love when people are involved in the art, the storytelling. It's not a symphony concert where people, it's much more. The opera is like you can root for the characters. It's meant to be like a movie,
Well, and you hope the audience is invested like that. We hope that we've done our job with the storytelling well enough that we get all of the feelings out of, the audience members. That's absolutely what you want. So, and New Yorkers, boy, with Porgy, but that was awesome.
It was a lot of fun. So now let's, we're performing together on February 8th and 9th at the Saminsky Theater in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, with Light Opera of New Jersey's Madama Butterfly. And be great to work with you once again. I can't wait to put this together. We have wonderful colleagues. Michael Boley will be the tenor, and Michael Nansel, the Scarpia, and Ashley Armstrong will be the Suzuki. And I can't wait to make this happen. What do you want New Jersey audiences to know before they come to the show?
Oh, goodness. That's a very good question. I would love for New Jersey audiences to know or come with the mind frame of just donating their 2 hours or 2 hours and 45 minutes to us so they can be swept away in the storytelling. I would love for them to come with open minds to be invested in this wonderful performance that I'm sure that we will bring their way. And just, in advance, I'm thanking everybody for, coming, because it's going to be a spectacular night at the opera. It really is. I'm so excited.
And not only is it spectacular at the opera, it's also Super Bowl Sunday, so this is the pregame show.
There you go. Get them all ready for that big old game. That's a good way of looking at it. Yes.
Well, I'm really excited to put this together with you and to make this great music come alive. And I'm just so excited to work with you once again, and wish you a
Likewise, Maestro. I'm so excited. This is a great opportunity for all of us. It really is. So
it's always great to revisit these absolute masterworks.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for being with us, Kristin, and Music Matters, and for starting off our 2025 right. And I'll see you at the opera.
Yes, thank you, Maestro. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. And please remember to like and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.